At at this particular time in history, with the situation in Ukraine, I've been really eager to dig a little deeper into deeper than the surface level theatrics of anti-Russian propaganda, the kind of the paradigm that the of the unipolar world giving way to a multipolar world, the hysteria around Marxism, which is particularly disheartening to me. I see so many very intelligent people in my online social circle who every day railing against Marxism, and without any real interest in understanding where it comes from or the nature of it, and very little interest. I would venture to say, in many cases, no interest at all. That they're so invested in this narrative of Marxism as a kind of organic sort of form of madness that erupted spontaneously and possessed people's minds like some kind of demon. And they're so in love with this narrative, and they're so invested in it that they have nothing left over for any kind of critical thinking about where things actually come from. I'm not much of a believer in much. I don't believe in much. I don't have time or energy. I don't have the inclination to believe in things, especially things divorced from cause and effect. And the idea that there's just these demons out there, and Marxism is a big demon, and people who believe in it are demon possessed. This is all too simplistic. And I want to know where it comes from. Honestly, if you're serious about fighting what you call Marxism, you better understand it. It's folly to try to fight something you don't understand. And it's folly to disparage with a kind of dismissive skepticism. When I bring this up around, a lot of people are like, oh, well, maybe, but, I'm not convinced. Well, okay, let's dig in. Listen to this. I found this great article, The Myth of Marxian Communism by Lyndon Larouche. And if this video is going to be a bit long, I might do it in two parts. The article below was released by the author on October 22nd, 1988. This period, from the late 70s through the 80s, I find to be kind of a watershed period where we can find so much that prefigures what we're going through today, as if today, things have come to fruition, and we go back to this period where things are still things that we are seeing happen today. The power players and the schemers and the nasty kinds of plots, they're all exposed during this period. But anyway, remember that famous myth of the legendary rabbi of Prague on which Goethe modeled his fable, The Sorcerer's Apprentice? Recall perhaps Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse version of Goethe's tale. Recall Jeremy Bentham, Jacobin witch. Jeremy Bentham was the de facto head of British intelligence. He was the one that ran the Jacobins in the French Revolution. He was directing them. Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, the hater of our Benjamin Franklin, really, who parodied the same story in writing her Frankenstein. Wow. To refresh memories, the story goes as follows. This Rabbi of Prague was famous for his powers of magic. Wanting a servant, he fashioned a creature from the mud, a golem, and by Kabbalist incantations enlivened him. He warned his wife not to attempt to use the creature, but when the rabbi was out on an errand, her impulse to defy her husband's command overcame her. Once She had turned the golem loose. She was unable to control it. Havoc! Such a golem is Bolshevik Russia. It is a simple sort of Jewish folkloric fairy tale, yet it contains implicitly all of the germs of a true classic tragedy. The moral flaw in the character of the rabbi prompted him to produce such a creature, and to place temptation in the way of a foolish wife who he should have known could not resist such lure. So, since neither of the two players nor the poor golem were able to change its habituated nature, the tragic consequence ensued. Such is the tragedy brought upon this planet by those who created and fostered Bolshevik Russia. It was real-life magicians, including the Bogomils of Venice and kindred precincts, who created this monster known first as the province of Muscovy and later transformed Muscovy into that Bolshevik Moscow, devoutly dedicated to the Dostoevskian madness of establishing itself as the eternal capital of the Third Roman Empire. I just remembered this book by the Russian historian. Oh my God, what's his name? He posits that the Kremlin is actually Jerusalem. What's his name? It'll come to me. Fomenko. Anatoly Fomenko. The heirs of the ancient Magi have supplied themselves and unfortunately our planet with many golems, including Horace Walpole's hellfire liberalism in the 18th century Britain and 18th century Jacobinism. They supplied us Mazzini's neo-Jacobin young... Did I skip something there? No. Oh, yes. Okay, yes, that's fine. They supplied us Mazzini's, Giuseppe Mazzini, who was kind of like... he was a leader of the young Europe, young Italy, these young America movements. He was under the direction of Lord Palmerston. Mazzini's neo-Jacobin Young Europe conspiracy, out of which sordid infection came anarchism, terrorism, Karl Marx, modern fascism, and Bolshevism. And these movements, black and red terrorism in Italy involved the P2 movement, P2 Lodge, and the assassination of Aldo Moro in 78. All of these things intended to cover for the sort of nasty backstabbing operations that were really being carried out by the aristocratic families of Europe on the continent and Great Britain. So today, this planet of ours appears to be well on the way to being plunged into a new dark age, a condition akin to 14th century Europe's new dark age, but on a planetary scale. Yes, I definitely have seen that. What Venice did to Europe during the Dark Ages is, I don't want to say a microcosm, because it was, the implications, the effects were vast and far-reaching, but you definitely see what we could be plunged into today with all of this eat the bugs stuff and these toxic injections and these bank failures and WEF. All of this, you can go back and study this the 14th century and see. You can see IMF conditionalities being imposed by the Venetian banks back then. That terrible event is not yet absolutely certain. Again, this is 1988. But if the world continues its present course at the present rate, the point of no return will be reached during the coming 4 years, perhaps the first 2 years of the next U.S. presidency, unless the policy-shaping trends of the recent 20-odd years are dramatically reversed during during the 2 or 4 years immediately ahead, the new dark age will be underway by the close of this century. So it's taken a little longer than that, but I think I don't think one can deny that feeling that it is upon us. It doesn't feel like conjecture anymore. It doesn't feel like prognostication. It feels like it's upon us. Its claws are already in us, and we've got to fight back. If that occurs, entire nations will vanish from the political map, as the United States is vanishing, in the course of the eradication of all or nearly all of the populations of those nations. So we're set, I think, for a massive depopulation of the United States, specifically. If that occurs by approximately the beginning of the next century, famine, disease, pestilence, and mass homicide like that which Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge wreaked upon 1970s Cambodia will be commonplace in Africa, the Middle East, South and East Asia, and in Central and South America. In that case, Moscow might achieve imperial domination over Western Europe during the course of the 1990s and even over the United States too. This is fascinating stuff because you're seeing now in 2023, we see the Russian Federation, and we see the Russian Federation representing something very different from what it did back then. We're seeing it represent the sovereignty of nation states, the sovereignty, therefore reflecting also the essential building block, if you will, of a true international world order, which would be sovereignty of the individual. It might be naive to believe that as the world shifts away from the unipolar, that is the Western pole, to the Eastern pole, I don't think it's going to be multipolar. I think it's going to be a pole on the axis of Russia, India, China. It will be a different pole, and I think it will be, in my own mind, slightly better for a number of reasons, but I think it's foolish to imagine that it's going to deliver us into a kind of as if the American Revolution were finally allowed to come to fruition on a global scale. I think that's maybe wishful thinking. But anyway, back to the article. However, the Soviet Empire too will disintegrate rapidly during the decade or so which follows. The prospect in such a case is this planet's plunge into pervasive savagery, bringing the level of population down to the vicinity of about 1 billion or even much less within the space of a generation. It were possible that the human species could become extinct within the span of about 2 generations through the effect of rapidly mutating human-specific 100% fatal retrovirus infections, of which the HIV, the AIDS virus, is but the first such pandemic. Fascinating stuff from 1988. Bolshevism, global communist and related subversion, and Soviet war preparations are an integral part of this gloomy prospect. Yet the Soviets are only the poor golem, the mere sparafucile of the real-life drama, as much in the grip of our common tragedy as we, the murderer's intended victims. According to the script, as long as we accept the confinement of that stage, we are fated to do no better than fend off the communist assassins if we can. According to the design of this drama, if we best one set of assassins, we accomplish no more than to be faced with a new pack of such cutthroats immediately thereafter. Why do we tolerate such a Manichaean nightmare? Why must we accept those terms? Is there no means by which we actors might drag the author of this vile drama onto the stage and settle the business for once and for all? Why not destroy the common author of Walpole liberalism, Jacobinism, anarchism, Marxism, fascism, and Bolshevism. Why not kill that Satan whom such as Friedrich Nietzsche and Aleister Crowley worshipped? Better, why not destroy that whore of Babylon, that Shakti, that Ishtar, who is the great whore mother of all such Satans and Molochs? Can we not do those necessary things? Kill Satan, kill his mother, the whore of Babylon, obliterate such holy scriptural figures? Is such business of God the business of man? Are we not the Creator's right arm, endowed with that reason which no other earthly creature possesses, that we, as dutiful creatures to Providence, might do precisely such awesome deeds when the time came? We must do so? I think I messed that sentence up. Anyway, you get the point. That is no wordplay with symbolisms. The words touch the essence of the most concrete, grand strategy required for resisting and defeating the forces of the threatened new dark age. The Creator beckons us to kill that evil whore of Babylon. To obey that command, first we must track that foul mother of Satan to her lair. We must pick up the trail, her Bogomil spoor in Venice. All right, now we're getting into it. This is what people don't want to listen to because they're in love with the phantom that's been generated by Marxism, completely divorced from cause and effect, and from very clever players going back many centuries. Venice creates Bolshevism. The putative author of the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 was Venice's Count Giuseppe Volpi di Misurata, also the chief author of the Balkan Wars leading into World War I, and later famous as the man who created the dictator Benito Mussolini. It was Volpi, through cutouts such as Count Sforza, and in collaboration with Black Sea grain traders such as the Rekenatis of Salonika, who promoted the famous super spy Alexander Helpend, Parvis of Odessa, and later placed that Parvis in the position in which he was paid more than 30 million gold Reichsmarks from the Kaiser's intelligence services for putting the Bolsheviks into power. Volpi was not a force unto himself, nor did Venice's orchestration of the Russian revolutions of 1905 and 1917 begin with Parvis's assignments to those undertakings. Volpi was the executive officer for a syndicate of Venetian noble families, financial trusts, fondi. Volpi acted in the interest of those families in Russian and Balkan affairs, as he did in putting Mussolini into power later. Does Venice mean the stolid Christians of the Veneto region? Not at all. It means the notorious usurers, the noble financier families of that city floating upon a cesspool. Well, that's a little much. Venice, a beautiful place, my God. It means today's far-flung global power, whose direction is concentrated in such satanic places as the site of the Cini Foundation. Cini Foundation, supposedly the most powerful think tank in the world, on the island of San Giorgio Maggiore. It means that city, which has been the cesspool of Western European civilization for more than 1,000 years. The Venetian noble family's preparations for the Russian Revolution of 1917 reach back into the 18th century to manipulation of the Russians' affairs through such scoundrels as the Orlov brothers and Prince Potemkin. This is wonderful. This little paragraph here, this is exactly what I've been trying to link up. The Venetian, the black nobility, the Venetian black nobility, with what's happening in Russia today. Trying to see connections, bonds, remnants of older machinations that might still be whirring away under the surface, under that very unsatisfying surface that we're all treated to, not only of course, in the pathetic, ridiculous mainstream media, but also in most of the alternative media. So this is very promising for those who really want to think these things through, who are serious. Inside Russia, the Venetian nobles' accomplices featured some of the most powerful aristocratic landowning families, such as the extended Vorontsov clan. It was these boyar families, acting in part through their control over the third section of the Tsarist interior ministry and the late Akhrana, who assassinated the westernizing, so westernizing in quotes, Tsar Alexander II, and created the sundry political, populist, social democratic, and Zionist organizations controlled by such Akhrana officers as the famous Colonel Zubatov. What is the centuries-old motive behind the evil work of these Venetian nobles? Look back to the 1815 Treaty of Vienna, where the Venetian John Count Capodistria, appointed by Venice to the rank of Tsar's plenipotentiary, presided over the work of Metternich, Talleyrand, and Castlereagh. The purpose of that treaty, making Russia's armies, quote, the policemen of Europe through 1849, was to eradicate the influence of the American Revolution from Europe and the Americas and to destroy the young United States in the process. And this is what we're seeing, isn't it? The purpose behind hijacking the French Revolution by figures like Jeremy Bentham was because the French Revolution promised to be kind of another iteration of the American Revolution, with King Louis XVI already working with proponents of this, what we call the French Revolution. Originally, it was going to be kind of a transition to constitutional monarchy, and this was largely informed by American revolutionaries actually present in Paris and working within those circles to effect this, what was going to be quite a remarkable transformation, which the British simply could not allow, because it would have meant the early death of British imperialism for some obvious reasons. But let's go back here. Go back to the beginning of the 18th century, when all Europe identified the first Duke of Marlborough as the leading English agent of the Venetian party, quote unquote. Yes, the Venetian party. George III was a member of the Northern Venetian party. He was a New World Order. What we fight against today is not really different from what we were fighting back then. It was the triumph of Marlborough over the murdered corpse of Queen Anne which brought Walpole's Hellfire Liberals to power and made inevitable the later American War of Independence against the heirs of King George I, Marlborough's Venetian party puppet. It was the same Venetian party, the so-called Lombards of the Black Guelph faction. It was the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, this split between those who supported the Holy Roman Emperor, and those are the Ghibellines, and the Guelphs who supported the Pope, but not from any kind of devout Catholic position, but strictly because of the financial power of being the Pope's, let's just say the power, not just financial, but therefore political power that was afforded those who considered themselves the Pope's bankers. And you had also then the Guelph faction split into white and black. We know Dante Alighieri was a white Guelph who fought not just on paper. He was involved in battle against the Black Guelphs, he made common cause with the Ghibellines. The symbol of the Black Guelph faction, whose usury in wars plunged 14th century Europe into the Dark Age, culminating in the Black Death pandemic. And just adding here that there's some conjecture that the Black Death was actually engineered by members of the Orsini family, who apparently had agents who poisoned well water all around Europe. From the beginning of Venice's power as the western sub-capital of Byzantium, it steered the efforts to destroy the Augustinian order in Western Europe, as it did from the time of Charlemagne. Because Charlemagne offered a very different vision. He was the city builder. Under Charlemagne, there was a renaissance that occurred in education and in the arts. But anyway, it was this Venetian party, in the guise of the Black Guelph faction, which exploited the conditions following the AD 1250 death of Frederick II to plunge Europe into the 14th century's new Dark Age. That is the same Venetian party represented by such agencies as the Pro-Genocide Club of Rome, and that more powerful Cini Foundation based upon San Giorgio Maggiore, which connives at bringing about a planetary new Dark Age today. So we see now the plans of the Club of Rome. We see this mass genocide being played out today. And so this is fascinating stuff. Western Europe recovered from Venice's last new Dark Age on the basis of the Renaissance projected by Dante Alighieri and his successor Petrarch, but also Machiavelli and Nicholas of Cusa. The watershed of modern European civilization became the AD 1439 Council of Florence. Out of this council came the modern form of sovereign nation-state based upon literate forms of common languages and dedicated to fostering the benefits of scientific and technological progress. Since 1439, the consistent dedication of the Venetian party has been to eradicate the work of that Council of Florence. All right. Let that soak in. As Oxford University's evil John Ruskin merely typifies this program, the Venetian party is dedicated to eradicating the institutions of scientific progress and the sovereign nation-state republic to turn the world back to conditions like those established by the Black Guelph Party at the beginning of the 14th century. Already, during the period of the Council of Florence, Venice was the westernmost center of coordination of the efforts to destroy the council. Venice, allied with the hesychastic party centered among the foul monks of Mount Athos, chose Moscow as the bastion of its counteroffensive against that council. Venice's choice of Moscow was not serendipitous. Muscovy had been created centuries earlier as a bastion of Mount Athos's counteroffensive against the Christianization of Kiev, of the Kievan Rus, the area of the modern-day Ukraine, and against the influence of Roman missionaries such as Cyril and Methodius among the Slavic peoples more generally. It was during that period, under the sponsorship of Venice, that Moscow began its rise toward becoming the empire it represents today. Crucial during that period, Venice, in collaboration with the hesychastic party of Mount Athos, conspired to place Greece and Constantinople under Ottoman rule. Venice, together with Mount Athos, overthrew the Paleolog dynasty of Greece and replaced it with the Byzantine Empire's new Ottoman dynasty, because the Paleolog emperor had subscribed to the theological and political terms of agreement reached at the 1439 Council of Florence. Venice offered the Ottomans recognition as the hereditary rulers of the old Byzantine Empire, now the Ottoman Empire. Venice was given large tracts of Greek territory in payment for this service, and was given, as a concession, control of the Ottomans' diplomatic and foreign intelligence service. Mount Athos, for its part in betraying the Greeks, was given rule over the non-Muslim populations of the Ottoman Empire, and the leader of the Greek Quisling party, Gennadios, was appointed patriarch by the Ottomans. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. Venice gave its client, the old Swiss Burgundian robber baron family of Habsburg, control over Spain and its empire. I think that's an oversimplification. I think it's a bit much there, but control over Spain and its empire and over the Austro-Hungarian and Burgundian empires. From the beginning of the 16th century until the Treaty of Versailles, Venice is playing the balance of power game among the Ottomans, Austro-Hungarians, and growing Muscovite empires, became the perilous flank in the history of Western European civilization and culture. The world is living with the results of that Venetian-Balkan balance of power game to the present day, as the Balkans and attached Middle East emerge once again as the cockpit of a potential world war. When that Venetian party then and afterward represented as a collection of financier interests spreading throughout Europe and North America, destroyed the Ottoman and Austro-Hungarian empires with the Balkan Wars and World War I, it also unleashed a transformation of Russia for the future mission of obliterating the institutions and memory of the 1439 Council of Florence from this planet. To accomplish this transformation of Russia, the Venetian party saw it indispensable to rid Russia itself of the westernizing influence which Gottfried Leibniz had exerted upon Tsar Peter the Great, although some of the Romanov Tsars, such as Alexander I, Nicholas I, and the ill-fated Nicholas II, had been won over, more or less, to the imperial vision of Ivan the Terrible, Alexander II's 1863 alliance with U.S. President Abraham Lincoln against Britain's Palmerston and France's Napoleon III reminded the Venetian party that it must rid Russia of the institutional changes associated with the Petrine state. That's a fantastic book. Henry C. Carey, what was it? A balance of something of interest, a harmony of interests, where he writes eloquently, passionately about the difference between the American system, which Alexander II picked up, as opposed to the British free trade system, which of course is represented by Lord Palmerston, and the Freemasonic agent Napoleon III, who was working in tandem with Giuseppe Mazzini under Palmerston. Inside Russia, Venice found two allies for this purpose: the anti-Petrine boyars, such as the Vorontsov clan, and those those fanatics, the old believers, Raskolniki, who had never forgiven the Romanovs for Peter the Great's attempts to Christianize the Russian Orthodox Church. For this purpose, the powerful aristocrats such as the Vorontsovs supplied the inside job, quote-unquote, inside job, 1988, the use of this phrase, of preparing the overthrow of the Petrine state. The Raskolniki filled the ranks of the nihilists, the populists, the social democrats, and the Bolsheviki. The coordinating role of the... Please forgive me if I mispronounce it. I'm sure I have some things here and there. The coordinating role of the accomplices and the dupes of the Western European and North American branches of the Venetian party provided that orchestration of global events which made the inside jobs of 1905 and 1917 feasible. The immediate intent of the Venetian party was and is today to stamp out even the memory of those institutions set into motion by the 1439 Council of Florence. Like its creation, Adolf Hitler, its deeper objective is to eradicate the memory of Christianity and the kind of Judeo-Christian culture associated with the development of Western European civilization. And I associate the allusion to Judeo-Christian culture, I associate that with the Habsburgs, which I see as inheritors of a tradition going back to Charlemagne, who was known the city builder, as the city builders associated with the Carolingian dynasty. I see the Habsburg as being more from that strain. But I'm sure in a debate, if Larouche were still alive, I'm sure I would lose the debate with him. Thus, in the personality of the Venetian party and its monstrously evil deeds, we have struck upon the spoor of Satan and his mother Ishtar, the great whore. Nothing less than the eradication of Christianity and its civilization is the dark purpose of those imps of Satan. We pack our luggage to depart modern Venice, to follow the back trail leading to the island of Capri in the time of the ancient Roman Empire. Tiberius, the Antichrist. During the second half of the 19th century, I hope you're all finding this as fascinating as I am. During the second half of the 19th century, the Venetian party's warfare against Western civilization took a new turn from Delphic Gnosticism to overt Satanism. Very interesting inflection point alluded to here. A lot to go into there, I'm sure. This is fascinating. In the English language, this turn is associated with Venice's indoctrination of members of the Acton family, with the cultish productions of Bulwer Lytton, with the activities of the fanatical Venetians, Oxford's John Ruskin and his pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, and with the roles of such anthroposophs as Madame Blavatsky, Annie Besant, and Aleister Crowley. On the continent, this is associated with the literary outputs of Jacob Burckhardt, Nietzsche, and Dostoevsky. Nietzsche and Crowley were explicit Satanists. Both proclaimed the age of Pisces and the dawning of a new age, the age of Aquarius. Their satanic symbolic philosophy identified the age of Pisces with Christ, and the age of Aquarius, or simply New Age, with the triumph of overt Satanism. Hitler and Mussolini were but two famous products of the anthroposoph existentialists' undertakings. Bolshevism was another. And I refer anyone who's interested in this, if you want the receipts, then read Professor Anthony Sutton. The general center of this Satanist project was Venice's noble families, including the Fondi. It's interesting, I'm just remembering there was a Bond movie with Daniel Craig where the final scene is in Venice, and I don't think it's any accident. I think they were trying to tell us something. Including the Fondi, associated with the Adriatic reinsurance cartel. The cynosure of this literary deviltry was the island of Capri. The central cult figure of the Isle of Capri was the Roman Emperor Tiberius, the Antichrist, who from his palace on that island had ordered the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Wow, this is new to me. My God. If anybody has any info on that, please let me know. The followers of Crowley, Alex Mrnta, the Maxim Gorky, who established the cultural dogmas of Bolshevism at Capri, Hitler's emissary Hermann Goering later, were schooled in the history of Tiberius's role as the Antichrist. They did not invent the mythology. Tiberius's role as the Antichrist is real history. The Roman Empire began on Capri. The 1st century BC was a time of great troubles throughout the Mediterranean littoral. The priesthoods of the various forms of Great Mother worship, the Syrian Canaanite Magi, the Ptolemaic cult of Isis, and the cult of Apollo were engaged in the effort to combine the conquests of Rome, Egypt, and Syria into a single world empire. My God. The bloody issue was what would be chosen as the capital of this new empire. The leading contenders were Alexandria and the city of Rome. The decision was settled on the battlefield against Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Rome's victory had been negotiated earlier at a meeting on the Isle of Capri. There, Octavian, later Caesar Augustus, negotiated with the priests of the Syrian cult of Mithra, the Magi, for an alliance which would defeat Mark Antony's and Cleopatra's efforts to make Alexandria the capital of the empire. The deal was struck. Rome began the nominal capital of a federation of Rome, Egypt, and Syria, and Octavian became the Emperor Caesar Augustus. The Roman legions became the real rulers of the empire, in fact, and soon, through the Praetorian Guard, in name too. The Isle of Capri, sacred to the Magi cult of Mithra, became the hereditary property of the Caesars. From there, Mithra, then also a sun god, almost identical with Jesus. From there, Tiberius reigned. The Magi's cult of Mithra was frowned upon by the city of Rome for some time after, but on Capri, Mithra reigned and reigned over the legions too. The Pontius Pilate, who had married one of Tiberius's favorite nieces, was hustled off to become procurator of Judea without the company of his bride until the later time Tiberius tired of playing with his ward. By these channels, the order was given and executed for the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. So Tiberius, as Capri's Pontifex Maximus of the Magi cult of Mithra, became the Antichrist, together with all who followed in the footsteps of such emperors of the first, second, and third Roman empires since. So, Adolf Hitler, according to Hermann Goering, imagined himself the reincarnation of Tiberius and sought to purchase Tiberius's old palace site on Capri for that reason. Hitler dreamed himself the emperor of the Third Rome, a Third Reich, who would exterminate the Christians, as Tiberius, the first Antichrist, had crucified the Son of God. Christ triumphed over the Antichrist. You know, this is very interesting because I'm thinking how Hitler extolled and emulated the Jesuits, but you can't really say the Jesuits were true followers of Christ, I don't think. By aid of, or maybe it was jealousy of Christ, that Hitler had this megalomaniacal psychological condition. By aid of the manner of course, it could have been the drugs he was on too. By aid of the manner of his death, he saved the souls of the nations of European civilization from enslavement by the satanic evil incarnate, which was the Empire of Rome. Through the internal depopulation and economic ruin of Italy under the sway of Roman law and a Roman moral degeneracy akin to that spreading throughout Western civilization these past 20-odd years, Rome in the West collapsed. So the Second Rome in the East was established. The heirs of the Antichrist, Tiberius, in the body of the evil Diocletian, moved east, and Constantine, Diocletian's heir, carried out the Diocletian socialist reforms, including the reform which legalized the Christian church on condition that it accept pagan Constantine as the Pontifex Maximus. Despite the formal victory of the Christians over Constantine's Gnostic bishop Arius, at the Council of Nicaea, the Christians were persecuted in the Eastern Roman Empire in somewhat more subtle ways than earlier arena practices. The Greek Christians were denied the use of that Platonic Greek which was the language of their theology. Thus, during and following the time of St. Augustine, the center of Christianity shifted to the West. As Charlemagne's reign established the strength of the Christian church in the West, the role of Venice was as Western agent of Byzantium's wars against the West became central. The capitulation by the weak Otto III saved Venice from well-deserved destruction, and its power grew greatly from that time onward. I think he's talking about the War of the League of Cambrai there. Okay. Venice's leading role in the overthrow of the Paleologs, the Ottoman and Venetian joint subjugation of the Greeks, created the division between East and West, which defines the Soviet strategic outlook for today. Those peoples Christianized from the West, including the Poles and the Christianized Ukrainians, became the domain of Western European civilization. The Slavic populations, which had lived for a time under the rule of the Bulgar and Serbian empires, became, with the Muscovites, the subject peoples used as bastions of Eastern enmity against Western Christianity and civilization. So today, Moscow is the putative adversary of all civilization. This is not because they are Russians, but because of a series of developments spanning in total nearly 1,000 years, developed Moscow as a future center of a flanking action to exterminate Western European civilization. Therefore, peace within Europe, from the Atlantic to the Urals, can be achieved by evoking from among the people of Muscovy those qualities which reflect their human birth, rather than the savage deformation of their acquired culture, which was directed from such places as Mount Athos and Venice. So, from the West, those who understood that Muscovite paradox, including master statesmen such as Leibniz, worked to draw Muscovy into Western European culture. The anti-Western fanatics, centered upon Muscovy, sought to encroach upon and destroy the West. It was upon this division which Venice and the prophets of the New Age pivoted the global strategies they have built up over a course of approximately the past 100 years since the 1878 Treaty of Berlin and the Russian secret police's assassination of the westernizing Tsar Alexander II. It is notable that Adolf Hitler was more Russian than German. In every crucial feature, Nazism was a German language parody of the Third Rome, variety of New Age dogma of Fyodor Dostoevsky. Even the Third Reich itself was adopted by the Nazis directly from the Müller van den Broek Berlin translation of Dostoevsky's writings into German. Wow, I'm being hit with a lot of new things. I had read sort of an abridged version of this article, and I didn't read these things. Some of this is new to me. Alfred Rosenberg, the high priest of the Nazi cult. I wonder if that's a Rosenberg Orsini connection there. Was a Balt associated with Russian imperial oligarchical families of the Tsar's interior ministry, educated at Moscow under Soviet rule. The northern Nazis under Gregor Strasser, including Joseph Goebbels, had entered the Nazi party as National Bolshevists. Cultist Rudolf Hess had been an associate of the Communist International, who participated in the 1920 Baku Conference of the Comintern. Hitler and his inner circle of Nazis fancied themselves Bogomils. These are a Gnostic cult established as the official religion of Bulgaria, which had been notorious in Western Europe as the Bogomil cult of Languedoc, of Albigensian crusade notoriety. It was a powerful influence on Venice's relevant noble families, as distinct from the strong Christian tradition within the Veneto region of Italy. The term Bogomil is the origin of the unpleasant word bugger, and thus of the ethnic slurs heaped upon often innocent Bulgarians generally. As Benito Mussolini referenced this, fascism and Bolshevism are twins, born of the same Venetian party mother. At the time Mussolini made that reference, he professed that the fascist Romulus had triumphed over the Bolshevik Remus. Since Yalta and Potsdam, it appeared that Remus has prevailed. It appears that Remus has prevailed. No matter. The point is that they're twins, skunks, of the same stripe and satanic aromas. Satanism today. The idea may be brushed aside as mind-boggling at first impression, but it is the most crucial fact of the present strategic situation globally, that captive house of imprisoned nationalities, which is the Soviet Empire, is no more than a poor golem. That Soviet Empire is our principal adversary in a very important, very practical sense of the term, no doubt. But it is neither an adversary sui generis or in any other sense. It is an adversary for the historical reasons we have identified above. It is not the ultimate adversary. It is not its own mother. All right, now we're getting into it. Yeah, right. Here we go. The real ultimate enemy, Satan's mother, has residence much closer to your home, perhaps the office of your favorite daily newspaper. In other words, as long as we view Moscow as the adversary, rather than as the dumb cutthroat some other agency has deployed against us, we are merely playing a part on a stage, in a living theater scenario designed by someone offstage. Please. It's kind of what I was saying at the beginning, but much better. Unless we grasp the significance of that point and act on the basis of understanding what that point implies, we, and Moscow and Beijing too, are foredoomed to destroy one another for the convenience of that agency which has written a living theater scenario in which all such contending forces on stage are merely actors. The adversary within nearest reach of the actors on stage is the collection of stage managers identifiable as the Venetian Party. Those instruments of present-day Venetian Party, those instruments of present-day Venetian Party, analogous to the Marlborough faction of the early 18th century, are such stage managers. This is what I've been trying to say. Yet these wretches, of the likes of Lloyd Cutler, for example, may be the imps of Satan, but they are neither the person of Satan, nor do they control their own destiny much more efficiently than those of us playing the part of foolish Hamlets on stage. These imps, too, are controlled by the living theater scenario, or today we might call it the narrative, and are just as likely to be destroyed by the very plots they imagine themselves to steer as the foolish innocents on stage. I think we're going to see that happening in the next few years. To find the real adversary, Satan and that great whore Ishtar, Isis, his mother, we must look deeply inside the human mind. There we encounter the reality of warfare and true strategic planning. We discover so the reasons why the most terrible form of warfare is that recently enacted as Pol Pot's genocide against the majority of the population of Cambodia, People's War. How do we locate and defeat Satan? Among the most crucial features of the 15th century Renaissance was the elaboration of the form of Christian humanism referenced to the model of the Socratic dialogue. This was crucial because that Socratic method is the window which enables us to look into the depths of our own minds, to discover what hidden assumptions may be ruling our thoughts and practice. By discovering and removing false axiomatic sorts of assumptions, including those of which we are otherwise more or less unconscious, we are enabled to achieve a quality of free will otherwise non-existent for mortal man. There's a lot of discussion, argument about whether free will exists. And here, I think this is beautiful, saying that it's something we achieve. And this idea about, allowing us the way in which we can penetrate the depths of our own minds. This is very beautiful. And this is what I was sort of hinting at in the beginning, as I was fumbling about for words, that there's no clarity when we simply are froth at the mouth and get triggered by the mention of Marxism, and when we know nothing about it or what lies beneath. Most men and women in today's Western European culture have no such free will. The ability of the liberal news media to brainwash the majority of U.S. citizens so much that our present society is akin to Orwell's 1984 on this account reflects that general loss of free will. Oh my God, if he could just, today it's beyond Orwell. It's post-Orwellian territory we're in now. It is said of most poor, foolish Americans today, this 1988 again, including those White House circles obsessed with the latest opinion polls, that we have become, in the words of sociologist Riesman, an other-directed people. Okay, this goes back to Tavistock. Long-range penetration, interdirectional conditioning from Tavistock. It is literally true. And the opinion polls were a way that the masses could be manipulated. And the way in which people began to feel that their opinion, even if it was based on nothing, and they had done no research, no substantive thinking on the matter, that their opinion somehow mattered, and that you could decide the most appropriate course of action by tallying up the masses of these basically garbage opinions. We do not think for ourselves. We seek to be overheard saying nothing. But those varieties of approved opinions we carry out of the classroom, the reading of the newspaper headlines, the evening's TV entertainment, or picked up as vulgar gossip. Such an other-directed state makes your mind and that of your neighbors Satan's playground. So maybe not idleness is not the devil's workshop. It's this. It's being at the effect of it. That's what mind control is: external control of the mind, and how it's so absolutely essential that we be allowed, that we find that we turn away at least at some points in the day and just simply go into our own minds and see as clearly as possible and deepen that every day. There, in the corruption of your own mind, you will discover the Satan in person at work, and his great whore mother too. All effective strategy and strategic analysis based principally upon extermination. What did I say? Upon examination of these considerations, or upon what we're seeing now, the offensive, the psychological warfare offensive against the United States is based on the extermination of inner sovereignty of the human being, of our innate ability to reason. So that word popped up in my mind. The principal actors upon the world stage today, we, like the Muscovites and even those imps of Satan who constitute the leading representatives of the Venetian party incarnate, are no better than the victims of that which controls their wills. Hence, on this account, all real-life history is mirrored by great classical tragedy on stage. That which controls our wills is the set of chiefly hidden axiomatic qualities of underlying assumptions which govern our sense of self-interest and which serve as self-evident truths even when we are unconscious of them, in guiding us to choose one belief or choice of practice over others which would have been available to a person actually possessed of free will. Thus, those who have not mastered the Socratic dialogue's practice deceive themselves each time they utter such words as I know or I believe. The belief is not their own. It is rather a kind of belief which possesses its believer as a cat plays with a captured mouse. Since that belief is generated by the axiomatics of which the believer is more or less unconscious, whoever controls those axiomatics possesses the will of the believer. The believer can be commanded by the Satan or any other agency which has implanted the relevant axiomatic assumptions in one's unconscious beliefs. In general, in the English-speaking world, Satan's work is typically represented by the dogmas of human